Hi, welcome back to 345 Delta Foxtrot. My name is David Ferguson. Okay, this video is divided into two parts. Part one is about Service Bulletin 43, and part two is about other deviations from the plans that I made on the elevators. This is part two of the series on deviations, and that's where I talk about how I've deviated from the plans, what I did, and why I did it. Okay, Service Bulletin 43 is about cracks in the elevator skins for the RV10 and the RV14. Those are the only two models that are affected. And there's a link here to the van service bulletins. And if you're not familiar with them already, I very highly recommend that you follow this link and get familiar with them. You don't have to read every single one immediately, but find the ones that pertain to whatever you're working on or are getting ready to work on, and make sure you read those thoroughly. Okay, as I mentioned, the whole purpose of this video is to talk about how and why I deviated from the plans for building the RV10. And these deviations have not been reviewed or approved by Van's Aircraft in any way, shape, or form. They're totally my own opinion and what I actually did. And they're basically for my own documentation. If you happen to find them entertaining or useful, great. That's good too. You should know that I'm not an A&P or an IA, and I have no particular training or experience in building aircraft. So my opinion is probably worth exactly what you're paying for it, which is basically nothing. So you should watch this video with a critical eye and think about what Vans is telling you to do in the plans. Think about what I did and what I have to say, and try and come up with something even better. This video is kind of intended to inspire you to think about what you're doing and try and find even better ways of doing things. But in any case, do whatever you think is the best way of doing things. It's your plane, your build, your responsibility. Okay, as I already mentioned, the problem is in the elevators along the hinge to the elevator trim tabs. And you could see that hinge in the lower right photo. And the cracks are clearly originating at the rivets along that hinge, as you can see in the upper right photo. Okay, so an RV10 has thousands of rivets. So what's different about these rivets? Why do they have cracks and all the rest of them don't? Well, a typical rivet is skin riveted to a rib. The skin is about 16 thousandths thick and the rib is about 36 thousandths thick. And both of them are dimpled and then riveted together. If there's any problem with those rivets, the whole airplane is going to fall apart. So we're just going to assume that all those rivets are okay. So if those are okay, what's different about these rivets with the cracks. Well, these rivets, instead of having just 2 layers of metal, they have 3. The top layer is skin, just like before, and it's about 16 thousandths thick. Then there's a middle layer, which is the rear spar, and it's countersunk, and it's about 36 thousandths thick. And then the bottom layer is the hinge, and it's about 40 thousandths thick, and it's just flat. It has no dimple and no countersink. So one thing that should jump right out at you, in particular, since it's in red on this slide, is the fact that the rear spar is too thin to countersink, or at least marginally too thin to countersink. So, as already mentioned, the rear spar is about 36 thousandths thick. So we go to section 5.5 of the plans, which is countersinking and dimpling. Chapter 5 is the general instructions, just about how to do things in general. And I'm not going to just sit here and read Chapter 5 or Section 5.5 to you. But my summary of Section 5.5 is given here. And the summary is that the guidelines that Vance gives in this section are not absolute rules. They're just guidelines. For metal thicknesses between 16 thousandths and 32 thousandths, that should be dimpled, or must be dimpled. For 32 thousandths to 40 thousandths, it probably should be dimpled. From 40 thousandths to 50 thousandths, it's getting difficult to dimple, and it's common to countersink. And for greater than 50 thousandths thick, it should be countersunk. Okay, that's my summary of what they have to say. You should read it for yourself and form your own opinions. So in this particular case, we're in a gray area. The skin is dimpled. There's pretty much no question about that. I mean, it's so thin it pretty much has to be. So the spar is 35 thousandths. So you look at the Van's recommendations, and it should be dimpled. It doesn't have to be, but it should be dimpled. On the instructions, it's not. The instructions are given at the bottom of this slide. And it clearly says to just to dimple the skins, and then take the spar and countersink it. And the hinge is to be left flat, not dimpled or countersunk. Now, if you take the spar and the hinge together, the total thickness is 35 plus 40 is 75 thousandths. And if that were just one piece of metal instead of 2, it should clearly be countersunk. But it's not one piece of metal, it's 2 pieces of metal. So that's what makes this a gray area. Okay, so in the last slide, we looked at Vance's recommendations in general, but let's think about this a little bit for ourselves. There's just a diagram of a rivet shown on the upper left here, and the dimensions are given. And we want to look at the triangle, which is shown in yellow, gold, whatever that color is. And you just take the angle and the dimensions B and C from the drawing, and so that triangle is one side of it is 1/28 of an inch long, which is 39 thousandths. And the angle shown in the diagram there is 50 degrees, half of the 100-degree angle shown in the rivet picture. So tangent of 50 degrees is 39 thousandths divided by x. So x is 39 thousandths divided by tangent of 50 degrees, and that is 33 thousandths. So that's for a rivet. So when you countersink that much, the countersink hole will just touch the back side of the piece of metal. The cone will just come to a point right exactly at the back side. Like I said, that's for a rivet, but that's not what we actually have here. What we have is a dimple. The skin is dimpled. And so we're trying to fit a dimple into the countersink. And if you go back to section 5.5 of the plans, it says that for a dimple and a countersink, you need to add an additional 7 thousandths to the depth of the countersink hole. So now we have 33 thousandths plus 7 thousandths is 40 thousandths. So for a dimple to sit flush in a countersink hole, the hole needs to be 40 thousandths deep, and if you're not going to over countersink, the metal needs to be at least 40 thousandths thick. And it's not. It's only about 36 thousandths maybe thick. And so that's why we're in a gray area or a problem area. So another thing that I did was I checked Mill Handbook 5, Rev J, and they have some data on the joint yield strength for various things, and this is for a 3/32 rivet, a regular 4026 AD rivet, and for different thicknesses of metal. And you can see that if you dimple the metal, the yield strength is just fine as soon as you get up above 20 thousandths. And if you countersink the metal, you're not reaching full strength until the metal is about up around 60 thousandths, somewhere between 50 and 63 thousandths. So in general, you don't have to worry about the strength of dimples very much, but you do have to worry about the strength of countersunk stuff. And if what you're countersinking is not all that thick, you could really be you can end up with a joint that's not very strong. Okay, what's the problem with countersinking in this particular case? So if you just take your countersink tool, your microstop countersink tool, and you set it to where you would normally set it for a dimple, for countersinking for a dimple, you're going to over countersink the holes, and you just don't have, as we just went through, you need 40 thousandths of thickness of metal, and you've only got 35. So the hole on bottom is going to be too big. You're going to have a knife edge at the bottom edge of the countersunk hole. Then you're going to try and fit a dimple in the countersink hole, and the dimple is going to be too big, and the skin dimple is going to butt up against the hinge, and it's not going to sit flush. And if you're observant and you notice that things are not sitting flush, you're going to be tempted to just countersink more. I mean, if you just had two pieces of metal and the bottom piece was nice and thick, that's how you would solve the problem. If the dimple is not sitting flush, you just countersink a little bit more, and then the top piece of metal will sit nice and flush. But if you do that in this case, it's not going to help, and it's going to make things worse. It could be that some of these cracks are due to people doing just that, that they're just way over countersinking. And so one thing you can do is just readjust your countersink microstop tool and adjust it for just a rivet. So countersink 7 thousandths less. And you can do that. There's going to be basically absolutely no margin. If you've tried to measure some of your countersink holes, there is certainly several thousandths of variability, at least certainly for mine. And even when I try and be very careful. So some of your countersink holes are definitely going to be too deep, over countersunk. And essentially all the rivets are going to be sitting 7 thousandths too high. And when you go to squeeze the rivets, the squeezer may push the top of the rivet down flush with the skin, and then the rivet's going to push out underneath, and the metal is not going to sit flush. You're going to have a gap, and you're still going to have the knife edge at the bottom of your countersunk hole. And you can try backing off even more, but it's going to have all the problems that we just talked about. So I don't see any particular reason to do that. Now, one thing that you might try is clamping the spar and the hinge together when you countersink. And then you're treating the spar and the hinge like one piece of metal. And it might work if you're very careful. I didn't actually try it, so I can't say from my own experience. But you're going to have to be very, very careful, and you're going to have to clamp it tight. I mean, really tight, in order for this to work. It's got to look like one piece of metal to your countersink tool. And the other kind of problem with this is it's not mentioned in the instructions. So most people are not going to know to do it. If if Vans had put it in the instructions, it would be interesting to see if this problem had maybe just never occurred, but we'll never know. Okay, what is Vans' solution to this problem? Okay, their solution is to take your elevator and stand it on its trailing edge. And as you can see in the photograph on the left, the guy that did this, he built a little cradle for his elevator. And then you're going to have to open it up along the top edge there where the skins are curved into a semicircular shape. You're going to have to open all that up so that you can get to the lightning holes in the forward spar. Then what you're going to want to do is take some fuel tank sealant and try and squirt it down to where the rear spar meets the skins, and that's shown in the right picture and highlighted in red. So you're going to want to try and get tank sealant all down along that seam down there. They're both seams. And then you hope that the sealant just helps to hold things together, hold the skins to the spar a little bit better. Okay, what are the problems with Vans' solution? Number one, in my opinion, it does not address the real problem. And the real problem is the fact that the spar is too thin to countersink. And they're just trying to throw a Band-Aid on the problem and stick things together a little bit better with some glue. And problem number two is that fuel tank adhesive is not a structural adhesive. Its claim to fame is that it's impervious to 100 low lead. It does not dissolve in your fuel tank. It forms nice seals around any gaps or holes in your fuel tank. But as far as I know, and I've looked at the data sheet, it is not meant to add any structural strength to your fuel tank. It's just meant to plug any holes. And here we're trying to use it in a structural context, which I think is somewhat dangerous. If you're going to pursue this type of approach, my recommendation would be to take a look at some of the 3M structural panel bonding adhesives, and one of them is 8115. I don't have any experience with 8115, but what little I know about it, it seems like it would be a much better choice than fuel tank adhesive. And the third problem is that, in my opinion, Van's solution just does not seem all that effective. The fuel tank adhesive is pretty darn flexible, and I'm not sure that it's really going to firmly hold the spar and the skins together. Compared to the rivets that are already there, my guess is the fuel tank adhesive is just not doing hardly anything at all. But that's just my opinion. I don't have any real data to support that. And unfortunately, we can't find out if Van's solution works for 5 to 10 years. As far as I know, they did not really do any fatigue testing with it and with this solution. So, if they did, they really should have included that in the service bulletin. Then, what are the good things about Van's solution? Well, the good thing is that it probably won't hurt. So you can do it, and it probably won't hurt anything. Might not help, but at least it won't hurt. Okay, so now that we know what Van's solution was, what did I end up doing? Well, what I ended up doing was I dimpled everything, all 3 layers. The skins, the spar, and the hinge. None of them are thicker than 40 thousandths, and I didn't have any trouble dimpling. It was just no problem at all. One thing that you do have to be careful of is when you dimple the hinge, to make sure that your dimple die does not, it only hits the flat part of the hinge. It doesn't hit the curved circular part where the hinge pin goes through. If you mash that or bend it way out of shape, you're going to have to buy a new hinge. But, I was just reasonably careful and I didn't have any trouble. So I don't see it as being a big deal. Everything ended up fitting together nicely. One thing I did to make sure that all 3 layers of metal fit together flush was, right before you rivet, you've got everything clecoed together. Just take your squeezer, put the dimple die back in, and squeeze all 3 layers together. And your squeezer will apply a huge amount of force, and it will press those 3 levels of metal firmly together. Then, you can do, you can re-squeeze like 10 rivet holes and then rivet 10 rivets and then do 10 more, something like that. And I did that, and as far as I can tell, there were no gaps. Everything came out flush, straight. The hinge is fine and nice and straight. All the holes line up. Hinge pin goes in easy. And then the other thing I did, just in case Vans is on the right track and I'm on the wrong track. Maybe the real solution is to find a way to clamp the skin and the spar together more firmly. And To do that, I increased the rivet size from number 3 rivets to number 4 rivets. And in my opinion, making that change is almost certainly massively stronger than just putting some fuel tank sealant in there. And one concern that you might have is that the bigger rivets are just going to look funny on the outside of the plane. But in my opinion, they look okay. And after you paint, I don't think anybody's going to notice. Now, if you're really trying to build a show plane, people go to extreme lengths to make their plane look pretty at the expense of structural integrity. So I can't really speak to that. If you want to win some prize, that's your goal in life, then this may not be the solution for you. Now, I think this next point is covered in the next slide. Okay, so what are the possible problems with what I did? Well, before I did it, my big concern was fit and finish, that things just were not going to fit together nicely. You've got dimple, dimple, dimple. You got 3 things all dimpled that you're trying to fit together, and maybe they weren't going to fit together well. They're going to be gaps and not line up or something. That just turned out not to be a problem. And also, I already mentioned that the concern about the rivets looking funny, the larger diameter rivets looking funny on the outside of the plane. And all I can say is they were okay by me. As it turned out, none of those problems materialized. So I don't really know of any potential problems with my solution, with what I did. If you know of any, absolutely feel free to comment. And in terms of possible variations on what I did, if you're really paranoid about it and you want absolute maximum strength between all 3 layers, between the hinge, the spar, and the skin, the thing to do would be no dimples at all, no countersinking at all, and use round head rivets. And the only real disadvantage of that is cosmetic. When people look at the outside of the plane, they might notice the round head rivets. And there might be a tiny, tiny, tiny performance penalty, like maybe top speed is 0.5 mile an hour less or something. But if you're really paranoid about this problem, you might consider that. Okay, that's it for part 1. That's it for the service bulletin. I did a bunch of other deviations on the elevators, so this is going to be a somewhat long video. So now's your chance to pause it and watch part 2 at a later time. But I want to just get it over with. And like I said, you're always free to pause it and watch it in 2 pieces if you want. Okay, deviation number 1 is I doubled the number of PVC foam inserts everywhere. There's normally 3 in the trim tabs, and I used 6, and that's shown in the picture in the top left here. And there's normally 2 in the trailing edge of the elevator, and I doubled that and I used 4. And I used the normal Vans PVC foam, which is a 1/2 inch thick or 5/8 of an inch thick. I don't recall which. And so I used those as normal. And I had some PVC foam from Aircraft Spruce that was 1 inch thick, and it was a square foot, 1 inch thick. And so I just cut that up and used that to make the other foam inserts. So they're actually somewhat wider than the Vans inserts. So I don't have twice the surface area. I have more like 3 times the surface area that compared to the normal Vans build. And the normal way to install these foam inserts is to use fuel tank sealant. That's what the instructions call for. And I used Total Boat Thixo Flex. You can see the tube. It comes in a tube that fits in a caulk gun. You can see that in the picture in the top left as well. And it's a thickened epoxy. And I did some testing of its strength. And in the testing that I did, it's stronger than the fuel tank sealant. Basically, what I did was an aluminum to aluminum peel test. So I take 2 pieces of aluminum, each is 16 thousandths thick, and I glue them together, 1 square inch, basically. And then I measured the strength that's required to peel them apart. And I tested a bunch of different adhesives, and this one was the strongest of the bunch. So I didn't just throw a dart and pick this one randomly. I probably tested 20 or 25 different adhesives, and this one was the strongest. It's less flexible than fuel tank sealant, but more flexible than normal epoxy. Okay, I added a doubler plate where the controls come and mount to the trim tabs. This is shown, the doubler plate is in dark gray in the picture in the upper left. And it has a different kind of primer than the rest of the trim tab there. And after the horizontal stabilizer service bulletin, I've been thinking about and concerned about all the places where things fit together. I'm not too concerned about just random rivets out in the middle of something. I think all that's okay, but where some control arm or something, or where the elevators attach to the horizontal stabilizer, or where the trim tabs attach to the elevators, or, any area like that, I've been thinking about, if there's some way to make it stronger, to beef it up a little bit, make sure that there's no problem. And in this particular case, I had just made the doubler plates for the horizontal stabilizer, and I had a piece of metal left over, 2 pieces of metal, and they were almost exactly the right size. All they required was just a little bit of trimming and some match drilling so that they fit. So for me, it was a pretty easy doubler to add. And also, where that doubler is, I increased the rivet size from number 3 rivets to number 4 rivets to make sure that it was held in there plenty strong. And actually, there's another doubler in the picture that's it's a little triangular shaped. There's 3 clecos there holding it in. It's at a 90-degree angle to the larger doubler that I just described. And the only reason that doubler is there is you're going to pop rivet together the 2 skins of the trim tab. And according to the grip spec for the rivets, the pop rivets, those 2 layers of skin are too thin. And so, like I said, I had the metal just sitting there. So I just cut a little piece, and so that now it meets the grip spec for the pop rivets. Okay, like I said, I just done the service bulletin for the horizontal stabilizer, and for that service bulletin I added some bolts on the steel brackets on the horizontal stabilizer. And so I had the bolts and everything, so I just did the same thing on the elevators. So you can see the horn comes up and kind of splits at a 90-degree angle, not quite, but so close to 90 degrees. And there's 2 bolts on each side. So there's 4 bolts per horn. And then there's 2 horns, of course. Those are same bolts that I used on the horizontal stabilizer, 1/4-inch bolts, grade 8 bolts, and nylock nuts, and red thread locker. And it still has exactly the same rivets that the plans call for. And it's just that in addition to those rivets, there's also 2 bolts. So it's not like I replaced a rivet with a bolt or something like that. The bolts are entirely in addition to what would normally be there. I also added some extra pulled rivets where the shear clips are, where you're just pulling the skins together. And I think there's normally 3 pulled rivets, and I added 1 more just so that the skins sit a little flusher, a little tighter together. I think it's no big deal. For those, I used Cherry CCP 42 stainless steel rivets. That's not what's called for in the plans. I'm pretty sure the plans call for an aluminum rivet. And so I had these stainless steel rivets, and so I just used them. There is, I guess, a very small concern about galvanic corrosion between stainless steel and aluminum. But there's lots of places where there's stainless steel and aluminum in this plane. So if it's a problem, this is just going to be one more spot in many. Then when you build the trailing edge for the elevators, Van's normal method of building a trailing edge is to use fuel tank sealant to hold everything together and then back rivet the trailing edge. And I do not like that method of building a trailing edge very well. So I did not use fuel tank sealant, and I did not back rivet. I mean, the reason you have to use the fuel tank sealant is because you're back riveting. You need something to hold everything in place while you're doing that back riveting. But if you use the Cleveland Aircraft trailing edge squeezers that are angled for a trailing edge, you don't have any of these problems. And I have not had any trouble at all getting nice, straight, flat trailing edges. So in my opinion, just adding some fuel tank sealant is not going to help, and it has the potential of messing things up. Things will not be sitting nice and flush as if the sealant was not there. And I don't really want some additional flexible goop in there that might be causing the two skins and the trailing edge piece to not sit together nice and flush. Okay, deviation number 8 is I used a sheet metal folding tool to bend some of the metal. Now this is really not a deviation, but I thought I would mention it because people have made whole YouTube videos about bending the metal for the trim tabs, or bending the metal for the elevators, and they mess it up, and they have to order new trim tabs and wait 3 weeks and bend them again and mess them up again and then order some more. And I just used a sheet metal folding tool for most everything like that. I don't remember exactly how I did every single bend in the elevators, but a sheet metal folding tool, this one is on Amazon. This is not the one I have, and this one is $18. The one I have I got from Harbor Freight, and it was on closeout, and Harbor Freight doesn't sell them anymore. At least I don't think they do. I'm pretty sure they don't. And since I got it on closeout, it was probably less than $10. And I found it fairly useful. You can use it to make a bend that's 1 inch from the edge or less. One side is really set up for 1 inch bends, but you don't have to push the metal all the way in, so you can go less than that. And the other side is set up for 1/2 inch bends. Okay, that's it for this video. I'd like to remind you that everything in this video is just my own opinion. You need to do your own research and make your own decisions. If you're in doubt, you can always talk to Van's technical support, get their opinion for whatever it's worth. And I would appreciate it if you like these videos, if you would subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and or leave a comment. And that will help the YouTube algorithm recommend this video to other people. And it will also give me some motivation to continue making these videos. So that's it. Thanks for watching.